Rockstars, welcome to Epiphanish, a podcast that will change how you perceive everything. Maybe. And for you to recognise where you have choice and options in your own life. I'm your host and guide, Lisa Westgate, an award-winning mental health advocate, best-selling author, rockstar, life and business strategist of almost a decade, and mum of three. Remember to share this episode and your Epiphanish moment on socials, and please like, follow, share and subscribe on your favourite podcast platforms. Hey Rockstars, welcome to another episode of Epiphanish. Thank you so much for joining me once again. I am very excited to share with you today. We have a genuine global superstar with us on today's episode. I'd like to introduce you or reintroduce you, depending on how long you've been following me, to Dion Jensen. He is the founder and CEO of the Lion Academy, Protecting Women Global and Success for Soldiers. He has over 7,000 members in his academy globally. He's a global influencer, inspirational speaker, and is the first guy in the world to do a few things that people said couldn't be done, and keeps doing things that people said couldn't be done. Thank you so much for joining me. Dion, welcome. Woo!
Oh man, it's just so good to be here, sister. And oh my God, how much water under the bridge now. Like, you can do everything I can do. Like, this is insane. This is getting a call from my sister who's already a global superstar and going, hey, can you come on and help these people with stuff? I'm like, what stuff? And then you told me, I'm like, we still dealing with this crap? Like,
yep,
you've already got all the solutions. Why don't they just grab them?
Yep, we are still dealing with the same crap. Yeah.
Oh,
So let's give a little context for those that if you haven't been following myself or Dion for some time, you possibly have not heard of one or the other of us. So if you're part of Dion's tribe and you've only recently joined, you may have heard my name pop up on a couple of Facebook or Instagram lives. And if you've recently joined the Lisa Westgate Epiphanish situation, you may not be aware that Dion and I do indeed go way back. So I was trying to work this out. I started sort of doing things around 2015, and I think you were sort of a couple of years in at that point. Someone asked me, I think a few years ago, maybe last year when we did that, when I was over in Palmy North on my visit, and someone said, oh, how did you and Dion meet? And I went, probably like multiple lifetimes ago. I was like, I don't know. I think what happened was that we were both in some sort of, PTSD support Facebook group something. Yep. And there was a lot of people playing the trauma Olympics,
Yeah.
who's got it worse, and they race to the bottom like, oh, but I have this and I have this, oh, that is really bad, dude, right? And they all validate each other's misery, and we kind of recognized, I think, that we were both speaking differently about it. We were both offering solutions. We were both talking about, well, yeah, cool, that's fine if you want to do that, but if you want to get over it, there's pathways out. And I think that's what drew us together. This guy's kind of talking a little bit similar to what I kind of talk about in terms of, there is another option. I mean, you can play the race to the bottom game, or you can move through this and come out the other side. And I think that's sort of where we...
Well, I can tell you exactly the first thing I ever heard about you, because I'll never forget, just like I can't forget about the guy from Lithuania and your haircut. Like, there's things that stay in this amusement park of a mind. That's a ride I keep enjoying jumping on. So every time I jump on the Lisa Westgate roller coaster and I do a tour of how we met and where we're up to and what we're doing, it's a roller coaster of just bloody awesomeness. But it's fueled by two things. Firstly, it's fueled by frustration, because we are two people that are paid to win. You as a paramedic are there to save a life. Me as a soldier back then is to take a life or save a life. The stakes are literally life and death for you and I. So we have this massive respect for competency.
Yeah.
And we just have this intolerance for just crybabies who are complaining with their mouth full. You know, when we were around people that would do anything to get through the crap that they're getting through. So we're driven by that frustration because the competency is down, everyone's crying, everyone's moaning about it. And for anyone that's triggered by that, let's talk about triggers first. I can't trigger you. Neither can Lisa. You can only be triggered. And that's your shit to sort out, not mine or Lisa's. All right. So we're going to provide some options. So that was the energy that I felt from Lisa first, was here's someone else that's frustrated that people are moaning about the problem and trying to, oh, we're really worried about this and we've got to sort this out while they're pushing the solution out a camera shot, you know, because they're getting more value from having this conversation about all these problems. It's like a hungry person who's telling everyone we're starving. There's no food and this is a conspiracy. And you're like, hey, bro, you want something to eat? I don't want that. They need to understand why it's wrong that I'm hungry, but I've got some food. Actually, thanks for the offer, but I don't like that flavor. You got another flavor? You're like, dude, I thought you were starving. And so the frustration was the first thing, and the second thing was competency. But I remember the first sentence I ever heard about you. And it came from one of your sentences said, I'm Lisa Westgate, the PTSD coach. I used to have PTSD. Now I don't.
Yeah.
And through the mass of the noise, I just heard, it was like someone hitting a triangle. Bing! And that frequency just cut through everything and I heard it. I used to have PTSD. Now I don't. I'm like, who's this? And then I tapped into your energy and it was fireballs, man. You were dropping grenades and throwing stuff around and away you went. And that's where it all started. So for anyone watching this, it started in the darkness and it started in the madness of this space. But that is not where we are now.
Yeah, it's really interesting to sort of think back to where things were at and how we were communicating with each other, but also outwardly back then. Like I think that frustration piece is really key because that was absolutely the driver, I think, for both of us, is because we knew and still know that there's another way. There's options. You don't have to be, stuck in that place where you're like, I wish things were better. And you're like, well, you don't have to wish. You can do that. Here's a 5-step fucking program and that will make, that would make it better. And yeah, I think that was very much that energy back then, was that frustration, but it could be different. It could be, how it could be different, because it was different for me and it's different for all these other people that I've helped, right? It could be different for you. And people were like, oh, it's just really hard. And I'm like, yeah, that's cool. That's your choice. That's fine. Yeah, that was very much the energy. And not everybody, not everybody appreciates when you come at them from that position. And it's interesting now that you've said that, like I can look back and be like, because I remember at the time being like, why aren't people jumping on board? Why am I not flooded with inquiries of, oh my God, Lisa, how did you get over PTSD? And I think potentially part of that was that people who are in that space, and they're looking for safety, they're looking for someone that they can trust and open up and be vulnerable with and go, this is where my life is now and it's awful. Me sort of yelling at them is potentially, not providing the energy that they were after, but it was in response to what we were seeing in those communities. And this is, like we were saying, I mean, this is sort of, coming into 10 years ago. The other thing I think that's really changed in our space, and I was talking about this to someone the other day, is I think like a decade ago, you and I, so using me as an example, coming out and saying, hey, I had PTSD and now I don't. And I've got option, I've got a solution, I've got a pathway. A decade ago, I got a lot of pushback. I got a lot of, but you're not a psychologist. I got a lot of, but you didn't go to uni to study this.
What are your qualifications?
Yes, what do you call, and all that, and how do you know? Whereas now I think honestly, we were just really ahead of our time, because I now see, even in that medical model that we have spoken about before, and we've sort of created parallel options to, even within that pathway of, you know, GP, psychologist, psychiatrist, whatever, that framework, they're now hiring lived experience practitioners. They're now hiring lived experience peer support people because
the ones that they choose. Let's not go too far overboard, sister. They haven't come across to the light yet. They're like, well, hang on a second, we aren't actually getting the results that we want.
Well,
so
yeah.
lived experience, but just the ones that we vouch for now.
Well, yeah, it's actually really interesting because I've been also hearing things from those lived experience workers that have come over into that pathway, and there's some, you know, disquiet about how they're being utilized, and there's definitely, from what I'm hearing, that an element of tokenism and ticking the box. Oh yeah, but we've got lived experience peers, you know, and these people are feeling a bit kind of used, that they're like, yeah, well, you're using us to say, look, isn't this great? We've got, but they still have to work within this very, you know, tight framework. Well, you can't actually give, you know, this level of advice because you're not a psychologist, you know, so even within that. But I think there's definitely in that decade, there's been that shift towards a recognition that those of us with lived experience, and when I say that, I mean, we've been there, we've done that, in our case, we wore the uniform, we've been at the bottom of the pit, you know, that very tired old metaphor of, you know, there's a soldier or a paramedic or a cop or whatever at the bottom of a pit and everyone goes past and blah, blah, blah. And everyone loves telling that 2/3 of the story in that metaphor, which does my head in, you know, oh, and it's only the person in the same uniform that, you know, drops into the pit with them and goes, it's okay, I know the way out. I'm like, great, now there's two of you in the pit. This is a stupid metaphor. Anyway, there's that recognition, though, that our experience of wearing the uniform, being in the shit, and getting out of the shit is useful, that there's value in that.
Well, that's the word, because where we shift in, for anyone listening, we operate in 3 lanes, right? Trauma, transition, evolution. It's a process out. It's every human being's process. Call it the hero's journey, call it a plant growing. That's the process. We all go through trauma, and birth is traumatic. Things break, things grow, right? Things break, things grow. That's growth. And so Lisa and I started in the trauma space, leading people out of the trauma into the transition space. The transition space is all about value. And so as we started providing more value for the different environments is when I went to the dark side and I went to corporate. So when I went to the dark side, everyone from the uniform community thought I'd betrayed them. I'd become a traitor. I'd changed my entire identity to create a different value in a different environment. That was the secret. So when I went across into corporate, it's like I wasn't this ex-military angry guy talking about trauma. I was the confidence coach. There's no more about, you know, coaching people through PTSD and trauma. I was just raising people's confidence. So the tagline was raising individual and organizational confidence. And I literally, I'll say it on record, sold the illusion and taught the truth. I was going into corporate organizations, increasing engagement, productivity, and revenue, because when you say that in that environment, they get really excited. Why? Because that's their value in that environment. You and I both know that as soon as we get in there, we help the human beings out. And so when I went in there, I found out that most of the leaders were either incompetent, nepotistic, racist, sexist, or the ists. They were useless. And then most of the people there were just totally devalued. And then when I was helping them with their confidence and raising their personal value, 8 out of 10 people had suffered some sort of significant trauma that they couldn't discuss. And so just having the trauma solution in my pocket was something I just pulled out in the middle of the corporate stuff to deal with the corporate. And for anyone listening to this thinking there's no value in corporate or in the influencer space dealing with trauma, most successful people right at the top of the food chain have taken traumatic energy and poured that into their careers. But life is a circle. Whatever you run away from, you're going to smack back into. So I deal with very successful people, very successful organizations and CEOs that are rape victims, male and female rape victims for the record, domestic violence, sexual assault, abandonment issues, PTSD, all of these human issues in this environment. So the first transition for us was coming out of that trauma space. We learned that modality inside out because we bloody lived it and ate it, right? Then we go into a new environment where we provide the value in the environment first, but we had this in our pocket. So then we learned all the corporate language and everything else. So when trauma popped up, we had a solution sitting right there. And then when we were dealing with people transitioning out of uniform into corporate, we're already in corporate. So now we're providing transition modules, and we want to go back down to police college, and we want to go back into the recruit courses, and hey, let's get them trained for these 3 stages. But the people making the decisions of whether we can come in or not haven't transitioned. A lot of the people that you and I ran into in the trauma space weren't even healed. A lot of those lived experience providers that the medical model is picking up, they haven't healed. And even if they've healed, they have no process. Yep. There's no duplicatable process, because you know what? Learning how to be a paramedic is a process of competency. That's how you get to save lives, right? And so we went from trauma to transition. And the first thing that we had to get over was learning the different vocabulary to communicate value. Because once you've got your trauma under control and you're on your healing journey, you now have a new identity, which means you have different value and you've got a different purpose. So we created the VIP of mental health modality. And in that modality, you and I are saying the exact same thing with different vocabulary, with a different process. Same thing.
Yeah. Yeah, 100%. I mean, I'm constantly talking about identity and the relationship between identity and mental health, right? So there's this big, thanks to all the awareness people, and I've got a phrase of yours that I use all the time. Thanks to all those people that have done the big awareness campaigns, we're all really now aware that poor mental health is this big issue. And okay, cool, great, we're aware. What I get really passionate about is linking things like identity, like you said, the value, identity, and purpose, right? That's why it's VIP mental health. Knowing who you are, knowing what you're here to do, and knowing, why you want to do it, and all that internal awareness and knowing yourself that deeply can only result in better mental health outcomes.
Yep.
Like when it's very hard to feel depressed or anxious or lost or pointless or aimless or useless when you know who you are, what you stand for, what you won't stand for, and what you're here to do on the planet. Yep. And so this relationship between that self-development work, personal development, professional development, whatever you want to call it, knowing who you are and all those things about you, leaves really very little room on a super practical level for depression and anxiety, in the pretense that depression comes from depression being the gap. And I've said this before on this podcast with other guests, right? Depression is the gap between the expectations you had of where life should be, what I should be doing, how much I should be earning, what my relationship should be like, and then your reality, right? And to me, that's 2 points of influence, right? So you can either readjust the expectations and go, well, hang on a minute, I'm not a reality TV star with 1 billion people on Instagram. I should probably lower my expectations a little bit. And you've got an intervention point of reality where you can go, okay, well, what can I do to get closer and close this gap, right?
And this is what you were brilliant at, because I love my triangles. You've got those 2 points of influence, but then you became the third. You became that tour guide between those 2 points. I remember when you were running the NLP workshops and listening to your conversations, and I'm just sitting there thinking, you've just made all that complex stuff really simple. Here's your expectation, here's reality, and we've got all the stuff in the middle, and you just pop in the side and you give them a tour and you give them the process. And you're like, hey, I can give you every step and you can walk up the stairs, or you can just jump in the elevator, push the button, we'll just go there. Like it's up to you. And so you made it really simple. And that saying I always used to say was, awareness without solutions is a zoo tour.
That's the one.
It's just a zoo tour. You're just raising awareness without providing the solutions, right? And so when I heard you started talking all the ways that you were speaking, you were always very articulate and clear on what is just the next bloody thing to do. And so another little gold nugget and some good news, because when we first started in the trauma space, we were really dealing with individuals and then pushing up against the system. And then what was happening is, as we got more credibility, those amazing psychologists, those amazing psychiatrists, those amazing doctors and counselors, because they were really hard to find, I'll be honest. I came up against more egocentric professionals that felt like someone coming out here without qualifications that were achieving results that they weren't achieving. That's fact, all right? So fact don't care about feelings. Feelings don't care about facts. So straight away, that organism defended itself and repelled us. But then as we were running alongside them, and a lot of the people that were spat out of that system came to us, but they came to us within view of the system. So for the true healers, doctors, psychologists, counselors, there were people that they couldn't help. And so when they saw that we had results with them, then they started getting in touch with us saying, hey, I've actually worked with that person for a long time, and I wasn't able to find a way to connect. It was generally the first one on language and background. I couldn't find a way to connect with them where I could even start helping them. And then when I got to a point where trust was an issue, they'd always back off because I was from this model. I've just seen this person on your podcast. I've just seen this person. I've read about this person in your book. I'm watching this person now fly. What did you do that I wasn't able to do? And I said, hey, man, in my modality, that guy's a paranoid assassin, which means you can't get close to him. You have to put information in a neutral space and then walk next to them and take your time. They're not going to walk into a room with another human being and sit with them. They just can't in their trauma. So I don't make them. And the psychologist is like, well, I have to sit with this. And if I could do that, I would do it, Dion, but I can't. And then we fast forward. Then I'm on Mike King's radio show, sitting there like this, and sitting next to me is Kyle McDonald, a clinical psychotherapist, right? And then the DJ Hamish is on the radio. We're taking live calls. We are doing live clinical counseling on New Zealand national radio, live. And so people are ringing up with their trauma and their issues, and then Kyle would talk to them from a clinical perspective, and then he'd turn to me and say, so how would you explain that? What would you say? And then as the different callers are coming in, Kyle would listen to what they're talking about, and he'd say, you take this one, Dion, because he already knows what I'm going to say. I said, oh, it sounds like you're a werewolf. And let's find your moon state chart and find some silver bullets. Now, I'm getting policed and supported by a clinical psychotherapist, which I massively appreciate, because none of us want to say the wrong thing. But I'm super confident in my content. I'm super confident in my process. I'm super confident in our lived experience. So I have no fear for that. But to be sitting next to a clinical psychotherapist, which is a qualification that is no joke, you know, and for both of us to be there with the one reason is to help that caller, that's the perfect storm when we all work together. But the only thing that stops that is ego and money.
Yeah.
I would love to get this, but I can't afford it. I would love to talk to a clinical psychotherapist, but there's a 12-week waiting list for the first appointment. Well, I'm having suicidal thoughts. Well, call us back when you actually attempt. And you're just like, this is ridiculous.
Yeah. Yeah. And that's what I was, so for anyone that listened to the episode previous to this, that's exactly what I was talking about, which was that system that and absolutely I agree with you, there are some incredible individuals working within that framework, and a lot of them feel confined and constricted because they are bound by legislation and funding and third party registration bodies and whatever. Years ago, I had somebody said to me, a psychiatrist. So this guy he was a paramedic, and then he went and studied medicine, and then he specialized in psychiatry. So, for talk about, has worn all the hats. And he was for a period of time, so a few years ago, he was referring clients to me. So he had people that he was like, I've got them this far. I've been working with them for 7 years on their their anxiety, whatever, but I think that there's a PTSD element, and could you work with them? And similar to you, you add us into the mix. I've worked with several clients that have also had a psychologist and a psychiatrist on their team already, and then they've added me into the mix, and their recovery's just accelerated. Yep. And the other clinicians are like, whoa, like what's happened? And it's just that it just helps things drop much faster because they have that in addition. So one of the things that I said last week really, really strongly. This is an and conversation, not
Yep.
an or conversation,
Good one.
right? Like with it, we're not saying that system's, stop taking your medication and do yoga and eat kale. Like we're never gonna be those people. What we do understand is that every individual's experience of life, of trauma, of mental health challenges, of whatever, regardless of the tag on it. Oh, okay, all you three people have PTSD. Sure, same tag, but their experience of it is going to be very different. There is a recognition, I think, growing that an individualized process is essential. And it was really interesting what you said before about there are people that are not ready to sit in a room in one chair opposite someone in another chair and open up crack themselves open and be courageous enough to be vulnerable and dump all their stuff out on the floor and go, help me put this all back together, right?
Can I interrupt there? And can I put this vulnerability thing to bed, please? Because there's a few things that we're going to sort out. So being vulnerable in an unsafe position is just stupid. So there was this massive pendulum swing towards vulnerable leadership and be vulnerable and have the courage to be vulnerable. What a load of crap. When you are in trauma and you are in survival mode, you are doing everything you possibly can to protect yourself, and you want me to strip naked in front of you.
Yeah,
it's not going to happen. No one is going to be vulnerable until within that safe space. And when you're leading, you can't be vulnerable. So that's dumb as well. Only in a safe space can you show that vulnerability. And I just want to put this other thing in here. The single most accurate factor for anybody listening here, when you're choosing where to go for your healing, there is only one factor that will determine the success of what you're trying to do. And that is not argued by anyone in any modality. It is the relationship between the person suffering and the person trying to help them. 100%. And so no matter how good I am, no matter how good Lisa is, if you just don't like Dion's voice, or you just don't like guys, or you just don't like Dion, I can't help you. And so it was so important for you and I to find out about as many other solution providers as we could, because we went further. We went from individuals helping with our modalities to finding each other where, and I'm going to steal a Lisa Westgate quote here. Trauma is a smorgasbord. The individual dish that we make off that smorgasbord are all different experiences, but we know all the ingredients. We know everything that's up in that bain marie. We know what depression, anxiety, which those words don't exist, but we'll leave that alone. Fear, we know about nightmares, we know about the night terrors, sleep paralysis, rage, hyperarousal, hypervigilance. We know all the ingredients in that smorgasbord. And then all we saw was when people were coming off their plate and we looked at their plate, oh, yeah, trauma. Oh, yeah, this. Oh, what's that? Wow. I actually don't know how to make that ingredient. I know what it is. Lisa, I've got someone here that's got the little purple thing. Can you, purple's your thing. It's not mine. Can you deal with this one? And I'd refer people off to Lisa. Go talk to Lisa, because you were the master of that dish. Like, we all know all the ingredients, but, as trauma chefs, let's just make that up on this podcast. We have signature dishes. One of my signature dishes is dealing with werewolves, with rage and hyperarousal and anger and fire, all the stuff that you can't manifest in a government or public setting, or you get kicked out and trespass and you can't get any help. That was a signature dish for us, dealing with werewolves. And I know for you, with the eels, man, with the ones that keep trying to wiggle out of conversations, like your signature dish was that bloody gaff. If I had someone that was wiggling around and finding any excuse, I'd be like, you should talk to Lisa. So for two reasons. One, I can't be bothered chasing this eel around the river. I got other stuff to do. So I'll send them over to Lisa. She can do it. And then all those people that I sent to you that try wiggling around and find excuses why they can't do it, you just go gaff straight in the head and go, yeah, we can keep chasing each other around the river, dude, or I can just show you what to do. And they're like, okay. So we've all got signature dishes, right? We all understand all the ingredients, but each trauma chef has their special dish.
Yeah. And I think it's in contrast to what you were saying before about potentially challenging egos as an obstacle for people to find the right healer or the helper or support person or clinician, whatever label you want to put on it, to find their person. I think that's one of the things. I mean, not to say that we don't have a healthy level of ego in that we know what the fuck we're doing. But we also recognize that I'm not the magic pill for everybody. I'm not the right fit for everybody. And that's okay. And neither are you. And that's why we have a network of people around us and why we connected. Because it sounds really obvious when I say it out loud and obviously with you, but it's not about us. Like,
Yeah.
it's not about another notch on my belt or another mark on the board that goes, yep, I've saved, 1,200 people from PT. Like, it's not, I don't care, right? It's actually not about me getting rungs on the board or you. It's about finding the right person with the right array of solutions for the individual in crisis or in challenge. Like, that's actually the whole point of the thing, is about helping them find the right people and the right pieces for
But
them.
that menu didn't exist. Like there was no solutions menu. That's where we first started. Was like, hang on, listen, like we can't be the be all end all for people, because there was no one like that for us. We had to figure this shit out ourselves. Like we actually healed ourselves. So anyone listening, so how did you guys get through your journey? Like, I was going through stuff I did not want to share with anyone else because people were relying on me. Pick all the excuses you like. Too embarrassed. Shame was a massive one. Frustration, I couldn't figure it out for myself because I'm a ninja at so many other things. Why can't I figure this out?
Yeah.
And then I went spiritual. I fell back on my faith and I dived in there, and that took care of a piece. Then I went energetic, and then I figured out all the energy in my body. Then I went diet. Then I went to the first psychiatrist, the first psychologist, and I just said, hey, listen, I'm an ex-soldier. I just need to know what to do. If you give me the steps, I'll go and do them. And that's the first thing he said. Well, Dion, psychology doesn't work that way. What you need to do is figure this out for yourself. It's more powerful when you discover the solutions yourself. And I went, if I knew what the F to do, I would not be
done
speaking
it
to you.
already.
So then I went on this big rant that, and then the psychologist, the medical model were all flipping idiots and blah blah blah, because that was my experience. The next psychologist I went to, I was actually on another contract, and I watched how this guy was talking to people. And this was a serious contract. This was some life and death stuff. Can't say too much what the contract was, but big guy stuff, people trying to kill each other, people trying to kill themselves, and we had medical support and stuff on that contract. And so on that contract, I ended up as the training manager. So I had to do all the inductions, train all the staff, do all the inductions. And as I'm doing the induction, I've got the psych teams coming in, the wellness team. And I'm like, oh, geez, this will be fun. And because I'd already had that bias of having this tribe of warriors get told by this other guy, hey, you got to figure this out for yourself, right? And so the team came in, and when I found out who the psychologist was, man, impossible not to love this guy. He was just a beautiful human being. He's the dude that would sit at everyone's table, ask how everyone's doing, and we just loved this guy. And then so, people were talking to him, and I just waited for a couple of weeks, just to sort of, all right, I'm going to go talk to this guy. Went in, sat down for him. His name's Jeff. Said, hey, Jeff, I want to share something with you, mate. This is my story. This is my journey, and this is what's happened. You know what he said about the other psychologist? He goes, what a dick. He just said, what a dick. Why would you say that? I was like, I don't know. You're the psychologist. He's like, what an idiot. We've got so many modalities that we've got access to as a psychologist. A soldier sits in here. CBT is the easy one because that's got a whole lot of steps in it. So he goes, what's your main issue at the moment? And I'm like, losing my temper. He goes, all right then. Hey, there's 3 different ways we could do this. Why don't I give you the instructions for all 3? You go have a play with them, then come back and tell me which one you liked. I'm like, cool, got a task. I got something to do. So think, feel, do became my triangle. We were either talking about thoughts, feelings, or behavior. And then I was like, hey, that's a cool lens. And I would come back to Jeff and go, hey, I tried this one. What a load of shit, mate. This just sounded like fluffy, bloody reindeer stuff. And he goes, all right, how'd number 2 go? Yeah, number 2 made some more sense, but I didn't really feel like it got to the deep stuff. And he goes, number 3, eh? Like, yeah, mate, love number 3. Number 3 was awesome because I could be myself and I could have this conversation in my head. And he goes, Dion, I could have told you that when you walked in here and just given you number 3. I was like, what? He goes, because what the other psychologist said was actually right, but the way he said it was stupid.
Yeah.
I'm like, what do you mean? He goes, yeah. So when you came in here, you're a soldier. I know your thought process. You're talking about this, and this. I know that the third option would have been better for you, but it is more powerful if you discover that and choose that for yourself. But it wasn't my place to tell you what to do. My place was to give you the options. And there was no options for us, Lisa. And there's no options for the people that won't access the medical model, which is 50% of the people that we dealt with. The paranoid assassins and the ghosts and the vampires won't go near the medical model. Most people in uniform will never report that they're struggling because they don't want to lose their job or their promotional capabilities. And no one that's got a reputation of being an ass kicker and really good at stuff can tell people their marriage is breaking up at home. And so we had to create all of these options. There was no menu. Then we created the menu, and then no one would let us open our own restaurant.
So true.
They were stuck in transition. Like, how the hell do we
look what's happened, look what we did. And then everyone's like, yeah, nah, not happening. Yeah. Just as an aside, if someone wants to know more, you've used you're talking about these archetypes that you created about paranoid assassin and vampire and the ghost. Can you just give us a reference for where is that information coming from? And if people want to know more about that, where can they grab the book?
Oh, yeah. So it's been so long, eh? So the book's behind me. It's the World's First Good News Book about PTSD. If you go to dionjensen.com, that book's free to download. So basically what I did was I took my head off and I looked at the main behaviors, all right? And then I just created comic book characters. So for hyper arousal and rage and anger, I created the werewolf, because everyone knows if you get a full moon, you get a werewolf. And we put a modality in that. None of these are your true form. They're just your survival form, right? And then we had the paranoid assassin, which is hypervigilance, all the trust issue stuff, not simply back to the door, all that sort of stuff, right? That became the paranoid assassin. And then the ghost was the nightmares and the flashbacks and the high energy reminder stuff. That was the anxiety to keep you still, remind you about the past, so you don't move forward into the future because of what they're seeing and feeling, six senses in here. And then the vampire that sucked all your feelings out and tried to make you numb, which was depression. And so I just created characters and just really introduced you to them, made you fall in love with these characters because they're a piece of yourself, and then shared what they were actually trying to do. They love you. They know you the most. They're trying to protect you, and that's not their true form. They're just stuck in survival mode. And then we managed to bring them around and introduce you to their true form, which is the protector and the healer and the watcher and all the beautiful stuff. And then we just sort of wrapped that all together in that modality, so it made sense. And we put it inside the academy as a course now as well. And then so that was that all nice and tidy. And then we moved into the VIP of mental health for transition. And then we finally got to evolve when we got ownership and control.
Yeah. So if anyone's been listening to my stuff and you've heard me talk about that there are no, I hear this all the time, like negative emotions, right? So anger, fear, sadness, right? The truth is there's no negative emotions. There's just emotions, because anything that comes from within you has a positive intention for you, right? It has a positive purpose behind it, right? So, anger is something that we've discussed, and we talked about the werewolf. So you would have heard me say something like, anger is there to let you know that a boundary's been crossed, right? Anger is that, alarm system that goes, whoa, hang on a minute, somebody's pushing a boundary that they shouldn't push. And sometimes it's we get angry at ourselves because we have allowed someone to cross a boundary, right? So it can be that self-directed anger. So anger is not a pleasant thing to experience, right? And rage, like full intense furious rage, and some physicality that came with that, so punching things and kicking things, was my primary PTSD symptom when I had PTSD. So my experience of it was very high energy, aggravated, and that was basically the only time when I felt like I had any energy to get things done. The energy was anger. That was my high vibe expression. And then I would just swing all the way to, can't get out of bed, numb, forget about it. So I actually was resistant to letting go of the anger because I was afraid that, well, if I get rid of that, that's the only time I actually
that fuel was giving me a positive outcome. Even
that's right. Like I angry clean their house, like it was the only time I was getting stuff done is when I was angry, and I'd go out and do the whippersnippering and, so I was afraid to let that go because the only other experience I was having in that period of my life was this flat, useless, like you like this metaphor of like that cicada shell on the couch, right? That husk of a person that was just kind of, you know,
Existing.
I
Yeah.
look like the shape of me, but there was not much going on, right? Because I was just numb and off with the fairies, or whatever was happening, just totally disconnected, disengaged. And I was worried that if I don't have these periods of like high energy and which unfortunately was coming out as anger, then I'm
Yeah.
just going to be like low and flat the whole time.
And this is what I love about anger. Anger is one of my favorite emotions because it's the most honest.
Yeah.
It's really, really hard to be sneaky and dishonest when you're rage werewolfing out. Like, so to
Yeah.
me, anger was the fire. And there's one quote that I share with people that struggle with anger and emotions. Generally, I say, all emotions are valid, but not all emotions are accurate, especially in the trauma space, because you could be, that emotion could be triggered by a memory from 30 years ago. So is it valid? Of course it is. We got hurt 30 years ago and it was painful. But is it accurate? Can that happen right now in this situation? No, because I'm the only person sitting here. And that memory is someone hit me over the head with a baseball bat. Like, there's not even a person or a baseball bat, but the music is there. So hang on a second, it's got to be something. So all emotions are valid, but they're not always accurate. And creating that space in between, that third person ability to create that space, was where all your narrative was coming in and gave me more ammunition in that space. Because in the military, that's actually trained into you. All the natural responses to trauma, to have that anger, rage, and aggression, we get taught that. So anger and aggression, we love it. We only have two emotions in the military: controlled aggression and love for your brother, which has to be greater than your own. That's basically it. So we're just walking around with an emotional toolbox that has love for your brother and rage. They're the only two things we had. And so that's where that metaphor came from. If the only tool you've got to hammer, then you see every situation as a nail.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. That's cool. So I think for anyone that's challenged with emotions, and it's really interesting that we're having this conversation at the beginning of December as we come into what can be a difficult time of year for a lot of people. Old emotions do come up. Things get flagged. It becomes a self-fulfilling circle, right? And you've spoken about this period of time being suicide season, right? And we have, statistically that's accurate. What happens is that because of that, it becomes a sort of a self-triggering system. So every year there are people who have a sense of loss and grief because in previous years they have lost someone due to that being this season. And so then for some people, this is going to be their year, right? Because so it becomes this repetition. Well, my loved one or my friend or my whatever took their own life in December 25 years ago or 5 years ago or last year. I can't live without them anymore, and so it becomes a thing, right? And then next year someone else is carrying that torch, right? So for anyone that is in that real crisis period now, I absolutely encourage you to go to Dion's website. I'll chuck all the links in the show notes, of course. Go and download it for free. You can get it as a PDF. And just read it, because it's going to...
We'll do better than that, sister. I can't come on your podcast and expect anyone to pay for anything. Like, let's do a Merry Christmas gift. If anyone's listening to this, they can have access to the Good News Trauma course. It's a $5,000 course for organizations per person. But anyone listening to this, if you're struggling with any of this stuff, just hit Lisa up and she'll send me anonymous details. You can make up a fake name, just need a real email address to send access to. And anyone that needs this stuff, anything that I've got in the academy, you can have it. Anyone that's on this podcast, just go through Lisa. You have access to any of my online courses over this Christmas period. I'll leave it wide open for you if you need it, especially on the grief side. I'm writing this book at the moment. I'll share with you now, Lisa. It's called The Mansion of My Mind. And so I've been sharing this quite a lot in the circles that I'm speaking at. And I say, in the mansion of my mind, there's many rooms. And that was the setup to be able to talk about anything in regards to memory. And then when we talked about trauma, it's like, hey, if we walk down this hallway of 2004, you'll see that all the doors on this side are all taped off. Please do not cross. And over here, that room's all burnt out, and that room's actually okay. And so when you haven't dealt with what's in the room, if you go in the room, that room could still be on fire. So we close that and we bolt that up, right? But once you can put that fire out, and same with grief, same with trauma, then it becomes a room that there's actually memories in there, where I can actually go into that room where Dip and Des are now, and walk in that room and sit down there. I can turn on the stereo in the corner. I can listen to all the songs that reminds me of the parties, and I can look at all the pictures. Now it's just a room that has memories. There's no trauma attached to these memories. There's still sadness for loss and grief, because I love them and I miss them. And I can sit in that love now and still miss them and still grieve and still cry. But none of this is on fire anymore. It's just a memory that can now become a beautiful memory. And then in some of the other corridors, there's some rooms that are still bolted up that I'm not even interested in going in ever again. And you don't have to. And so now in that evolutionary space, where we're dealing with people with trauma now, they never have to tell me what it is. You never have to unpack any of it. All I need to know is, hey, what's the flavor? You know, so on the smorgasbord, so is this an entree? Is this a main, or is this a dessert? That's all I want to know. Oh, I'm dealing with, this one's actually physical, Dion. That one's sexual. This one relates to that. I go, cool. That's all I need to know. You don't have to continually keep unpacking your bloody trauma. And you were the first one I heard nut off about that. I heard you go full psychopathic unicorn on one of your events, man. It was like, if I could create a picture of this for anybody listening, close your eyes and imagine the most somber funeral setting that you can. Everyone's in there dressed in black. There's a coffin up the front, and everyone is just opening and closing the bloody coffin. Opening the coffin, pulling out this dead guy and putting him back in, and opening up and putting him back in. And all these people are sitting there getting more and more upset. And then you can hear the sound of galloping hooves, and this bloody rock star just comes riding in on a unicorn, kicks the door in, rides up on the stage, turns the unicorn around, and just absolutely double barrels this moron right in the chest out through the open window. And you just yell out, close the fucking coffin and bury that guy. And that's what it felt like when I heard you say, stop unpacking everyone's bloody trauma every time you talk to them. Like, for God's sake.
Yeah, once a week for 50 minutes, you're going to come in and we're going to explore the depths of your pain over and over again. And
Does it hit?
Somehow assume that that's going to fix the problem. I'm like, what? Yeah, look, to be clear, there is a usefulness in a level of reflection for context, right? We need to be able to look back and go, oh, okay, cool. So, this is what the thing that bothers me is in that sort of setting, not a funeral setting, in a like a traditional talk-based therapy, sit down, okay, let's pull this apart kind of modality, is that the individual sitting in the chair who's had the experience, they already know what the movie is, right? Yep. They lived it. They've got it. They replay it over and over again. So when the healer, helper, counselor, whoever requires for their modality to have that level of detail, that they need that individual to unpack it in great detail, they rip the Band-Aid off, they get them bleeding, and they're like, oh, okay, now I understand. We're both sitting here covered in blood. Now I get it. Okay, great. All right. Well, next week you come back and we'll start putting this all back in and we'll pack it with gauze and we'll sort you out. And that person goes, okay. And then they wander off bleeding now that you've ripped the Band-Aid off. And, they're going to wait a week until their next appointment. Now, they already knew all the things that they just told you. Exactly. And all you've done is open Pandora's box and then send them away with it. And in my mind, that window, that week in between, that is so risky, that's so potentially dangerous, that all those coping mechanisms or whatever they've done to be able to put that shit in a box well enough that they can come and ask for help, and you've just ripped it all off and gone, okay, well, next week we'll sit down and we'll have a chat about how we can put everything back in the box. So when you are in and look, for some people, let's say 30%, It works fine. They go once a week, and that talk-based therapy, DBT, CBT, FBT, whatever, all the things, that works for them and it's great.
Yep.
That leaves 70% that it's either really bad for or not so great for, right? And potentially re-traumatizing for a small percentage where you're actually making it worse by approaching it that
was
way.
the importance of that menu. And like the good psychs do this amazing. They'll come in and they'll form that connection. And firstly, they're bound by that they actually have to come through the door. And anyone that has to be there, training anyone in any format or situation where you have to be there, you're already up against it. You want people to have the desire, not the desperation. But then they'll sit down and they'll connect first just to make sure that people feel comfortable with them, and they'll gradually drill down on this, but they're bound by the location, they're bound by the time. And there's not a lot of monitoring on what happens on the self stuff until you see them again. There's no, and this is where what we were doing in our training and our monitoring was critical. It's like in a ward, the doctor is only getting an update on the patients as he walks around and he picks up the clipboard and he reads the notes. Once he puts that clipboard down, you're out of his mind and now they're over to the next clipboard. But when you're working with an actual coach or a mentor, especially online, and this was a game changer, we could have the conversation, we could do this video call, we could jump into Trello or Google Docs or whatever we were doing, we could set a task with a reminder. And then as people were completing the tasks, I could go in the academy and say, oh, they've completed this module, stopped. Weeks gone by, no other module. Hey, just checking in. You haven't done that module this week. Oh, sorry about that, Dion. Got really, really busy at work. I'll get onto it later. Then they carry on. So we've always got eyes on. We can read what's going on. Yeah. And then with social media, we were picking up a lot of cues on people's posts that we were working with, which is really cool as well. And so there's a level of oversight and management when you're a coach that you have for your students that, with all due respect, stops at 5:30 in the medical model. Like once that doctor or psychologist goes home at 5:30, and I apologize because I know you're under the pump, a lot of psychs and doctors, you're not even going home till 9 or 10. But in that model, your requirement to service your client stops at 5:30. It stops the moment you walk outside the door. But with us here in the academy and at the Spiral Evolution Academy as well, and anything to do with Lisa's, we've got our eyes on you for however long you're in our program. Our eyes are on you 24/7. That's what you're paying for. That's the level of care that you're getting. And then while we're talking about the money side of things, the difference between public healthcare and private healthcare, everyone knows that if you've got the money or if you've got the insurance, you go straight for private. You don't muck around in the public model because you're behind everybody else. And so what was happening is we were providing an international world-class private hospital service, one-on-one drilling down right there for you that everyone wanted for free, and the public health system didn't even want to access. And then those that were in the private side of practice stuff, those that were true loved working with us. And those that didn't were like, how come you guys get paid more than we do? I said, because we get the results and we're cooler. There's no, people don't want to be, they want to know that they're working with the medical model unless they've got that relationship there. And so what I'm finding now is there's this other things happening in this evolution space, sister, where the best way to explain is like the Los Angeles drug rehab centers for celebrities, so they got this basically a resort where they just go and get out of the public eye, and I think they're supposed to be getting off the drugs and the alcohol, but they never seem to do. But it's okay if you go to rehab. Like if a celebrity goes to rehab, it's like they're just going to a resort, they're going on holiday, right? So there's no real stigma attached to going to rehab now if it's like that private hospital sort of feeling. And that's the shift on feeling now. Retreat centers, even if it's trauma, even if it's the sort of stuff, that whole retreat center, holistic sort of side is actually overtaking the medical model now. And I think there's a lot of friction here because we're just about to pop. We're just about to pop where, hey, you know what? You can send 10 clients down to New Zealand and stay at the Lion Academy Village. And you can actually go to a rehab in New Zealand by the beach. Like you can go to a retreat center in Melbourne, go down to the beach for coffee, and then go and do Lisa's workshops. We're that close to a psychosocial shift, totally away from the medical model. And a lot of these places are actually done by ex-medical people because they know all the gaps. So I see that as massively exciting, but I also see it very dangerous. And one of the things that we always want to guard ourselves against is being hypocrites. Like, I don't want to be hypocritical and say, hey, listen, the medical model in isolation cannot work. Okay, it's doing an amazing job for what it is, but it cannot work in isolation. You need the medical model. You need lived experience solution providers all working together. You're going to need this next holistic level, and life will come full circle. We will go natural again, and we'll end up back in the villages eating good food, talking about the stuff around the campfire where 12-year-olds go to a school and talk about self-love. Like what we're going to get there. What we don't want to happen is demonize the medical model and say, that didn't work. We're going to run over here and create flipping kumbaya, bloody healing island in the Mediterranean, because the medical model is still critical. And so I love how you say this is not an either or, it's an and conversation. It's about putting all the jigsaw pieces back together.
It has to be. And I think if we're truly going to evolve, then it has to be an and conversation, because if we keep pendulum swinging with an either or, that's bad, we're good, and these ridiculous binary polarities, we're just going to keep pinballing back and forth, right? And everyone's going to go, oh, okay, so we're going to go all natural, we're going to do this, and then in another 10 years, we're going to go, oh, that was terrible, we should probably speak to a psychologist. You're like, oh, hang on a minute, let's bypass that whole waste of time and people's lives, because in the meantime, I know in Australia, roughly 3,000 people a year commit suicide, or sorry, not commit, roughly 3,000 people a year take their own lives by suicide, die by suicide. Just old language habits that I'm working on. So if we have another 10 years, until things change again, that's a lot of people. That's a lot of people. And I look at these things now, and this is this full circle thing that I sort of mentioned to you before we started recording. I came through my own experience, right? So lived experience, a decade or so as a paramedic, healthcare before that, dual rape survivor, intergenerational trauma, blah, blah. Go and have a look at episode 1, the origin story. If you don't know the origin story, go and check that out, right? So came through that, diagnosed PTSD, anxiety, depression, 3 months on the couch. This is my life now. Okay, all right, if you say so. And then went, this is not okay. I'm not okay with this. This is not all right. I need a plan B. And then spent 18 months getting myself well. And that was through all of this, right? All of this personal development, VIP of mental health, which didn't exist then, but essentially what I did. And getting to know myself and made choices about who I wanted to be in the life I wanted to live. My first instinct from the moment that I got a psychiatrist report that said, you no longer fit the parameters of PTSD. I can't tick these boxes anymore, right? I had PTSD and now I don't, right? That's where that came from, because of very literally what happened. I had 32 years of my life without it. I had 2 years with it. And then I've since had nearly 10 years without it, right? So, my first instinct was to turn 180 degrees to where I came from. And I went back to paramedics, I went back to police, I went back to fireys, I went to doctors, and I was like, hey, I know that you guys are struggling with this stuff, because I know plenty of individuals that have had a similar experience and diagnoses collection to me. And I said, there's another way. You don't have to just sit on the couch and watch Netflix and like, this is your life now, collect your disability pension. If you don't want it to be, there's a path, because I just walked it, right? Yeah. And I copped so much hate, right? I copped a lot of hate. How dare you? If you healed your PTSD, then you didn't really have PTSD in the first place, because they were of the identity that it was for life, right? Profiting off the misery of others. I had people say awful, awful things to me and just really slam me down. And of course, as we've said, organizationally, right, my previous employer in particular had wanted nothing to do with it, right? Now, like I said, in the last decade, things have shifted in terms of the value of someone with lived experience. It goes, I wore the uniform, I fell in the shit, I got out of the shit, and now I have a system to get out of it. that is received differently now than it was,
Yep.
8.5, 9, 10 years ago. After I copped that, who are you? You're not qualified. How dare you? You can't say things like you can cure people of anxiety. And I'm like, well, I kind of can. Like, anyway.
Oh, that's what I've been doing, but okay.
Yeah. Well, had it and then don't. So, it's really dangerous to give people false hope. And I'm like, what makes it false hope and not actual hope? Right. So we had all interesting conversations back
More
then.
dangerous than killing themselves. We can't give them false hope.
Yeah, it was just it was rough. It was tough as someone who had just entered the helping space to get shut down so brutally. And so I really wandered off, right? And over the last decade, I've done a whole bunch of other different things. I'm qualified to do business coaching. I help people create intellectual property assets for their business because it comes from them inside. So if you're interested in that, that's the Rebel to Rockstar program. Can take you through that process as well. And there's lots of other interests and other things that I've done in the meantime. And to be honest, to be brutally honest, which probably just because you're here and I do feel safe, although there's part of my brain that's like, Lisa, this is a podcast. Everyone is going to know this. I have not been financially successful over that 10 years in any sort of consistent way, right? I've had the odd month where I've made 15K because I've had like 2 people sign up to work with me as VIPs, right? But there has been no consistent level. I don't drive a Lamborghini. I don't live in a mansion with a pool. I don't go on overseas trips, every 6 months. My husband works full time. Like, I'm not, I haven't become a millionaire through this. And that has led me to bend and pivot and switch. And okay, so I'm a coach and now I'm a trainer and I'm a speaker, and like you enhance your skill set, right? This is why Dion and I know how to build a website, and we know how to like upload videos to YouTube, and we know
how to build it broke.
That's like, we know how to do all these things because we had to learn, right? Because we had to go, okay, what other skill sets do I need that's potentially going to enhance the impact that I can make on the world and what I want to do in the world. And so I've been through all these deviations and created a Facebook group and a 90-day program and started a podcast a few weeks ago, right? So I've done all the things, won awards, written books, contributed to multi-author, blah-de-blah, Amazon bestseller, yada, yada, right? Like all the things that you're meant to do.
Ticked all the influencer boxes and all the online success coach boxes, done it all.
Exactly. Fantastic. And still trying to work out how to pay some bills. So do I help people when they reach out? Did I have a phone call at 11 o'clock last night with a dear friend of mine's loved one who said, I have a counselor, but they've gone on annual leave. And I really need to talk to someone. Okay, that's cool. So we talked till nearly midnight and we talked through the stuff that was coming up for them and it was useful for them. Am I still taking those phone calls? Am I still helping? I limit it. I don't take phone calls at 11 for everybody, just so you guys know. Don't call me at 11, right? But it's interesting because I've really taken most of this year to reflect and to refine and go, okay, I can do all of these things. Sure. Lots of people have been beautiful and sent me lovely messages. I watch your videos on TikTok. I enjoy your podcast. You're so inspirational. I love all your content. You said that thing in that video really helped me understand myself better. Excellent. Do you want to be a client? No. Okay, great. Right. And I think, and I'm really pulling back the curtain here, guys.
Yep.
I think what has been confusing for you guys as my audience And Dion, I'm sure you've been witnessing from the outside and quietly waiting for me to, psychologist style, figure it out on my own, is that because I have been unclear and unfocused on what I am, in Dion's language, a flippin' ninja at,
Yeah.
and I haven't been clearly demonstrating, if this is the issue that you are having, this, you need me to help you resolve it, right? If this is what's going on, we need to work together. You need to work with me, right? And because I haven't come across or conveyed that strongly, there's a lot of, I guess maybe I use a lot of softer language, then I think it's actually been doing a disservice to the people that potentially could have worked with me over that period of time, because they didn't know, or they didn't have the confidence that I was the person that they needed in their life. And I've been having these conversations lately with some business mentors. And I had a chat a couple of days ago, and I got asked the question, what fires you up? What are the things that, you're really passionate about? And I said, well, I want people to know that self-development and all that stuff that we've been talking about has to have positive mental health outcomes. I want to connect those dots for people, that if you're sitting there going, oh, I want to talk to somebody, but it's December and there's a 6-month waiting list, so I guess I'll just keep riding through with my, drugs, alcohol, social media addiction, whatever other coping strategies people are using, and I'll wait until I can get that appointment. You can do stuff in the meantime. There's stuff available. We're here 24 hours a day. And what has really become clear for me in the last couple of days, and I think it's going to influence what happens with this podcast and the direction that this is going to take, is that what I am super committed to is, and have been, and this is the full circle, right? I, more than anything, I know that I can help the helpers. I know that I can heal the healers. I know that I can support the supporters. So people that are in that space where they are the beacon for others, whether they're wearing a uniform, whether they're just that person in their family, whether they're a peer worker or a nominated mental health first aider at their workplace, if you are the person that everyone else comes to, those are the people that need the support, because they have their own stuff going on, and then everybody else puts their stuff on them, right? So this refocusing and going, right, what am I here for? What is Lisa Westgate about? Lisa Westgate is about saying, if you are in the helping space and you need help and you go, but everyone comes to me, right? I'm the hero. I'm the rescuer. People call the emergency number and I show up, right? My mum said to me, I think I was about 3 years into my ambulance career, and my mum just burst out laughing, and I was like, what's funny? And she goes, I still think it's hilarious that people call 000, which is the number here in Australia, people call 000 on the worst, darkest day in the biggest crisis, and you show up, right? Lisa turns up. I'll fix it. I'm here to say, right? Because she still sees me as a 3-year-old, right? In her head, I'm constantly a 3-year-old.
My baby girl's out there.
Right. She was like, haha, that's so cute that you're like, oh, I can do it. I'm Lisa the ambulance lady, right? And that was reflective of also how I felt at that time in my career. Like, I was playing dress ups. I hadn't embodied that role at that point. Part of the obstacle that we have as helpers, healers, fireys, paramedics, doctors, right? Obviously, most of you guys are aware, we had this personal experience in our family just over a year ago where a loved one of mine who was a doctor took their life, right? No one is immune from this. And there's this extra layer of obstacle when we're the rescuer or we're the hero, right? You can't be the hero and the victim in the same story, right? It does it doesn't make sense in our Marvel universe brain.
Well, see, here's the thing. It's because that's environmental. You can't be the hero and the victim in a space where there's people that are wounded. When you come into the other space, like you and I are in this space right now. So right now, you and I are in this space. You and I have a connection because we've done the same work. So we don't have to have a conversation to understand what the stresses are of being responsible for other people's lives. And you can't explain to someone else listening to this podcast who hasn't been responsible for other people's lives, not only to the point of being responsible for other people's lives, but that's your role. You're actually trained to do this day in and day out to be exposed to trauma. Day in and day out, you're responsible if people live or die. That is your day in, day out pressure. You cannot explain it to someone that hasn't been in that. And so this is the similar side to professional supervision, right? So psychologists and psychiatrists and counselors have professional supervision. They have someone the next level up that they can go to unload as leaders, because, and this goes back to what I said right at the start, because you cannot be seen to be vulnerable when you're leading a space. That's why it's stupid, because even if we said, and we're not, if I led a crisis, if I turn up to lead crisis, everyone's going to go, there's Dion from the Line Academy. He's not scared of any of this sort of stuff. If we do what he says, we're going to be sweet. And I'll go through that and I'll communicate, hey, man, I feel the fear too. It doesn't affect me. We're going to go do this. We're going left. And then away we go and everything else is fine. Now, inside, I could be absolutely crapping myself. But I'm not going to show that because they're relying on me to be strong. And this is where you have to be strong, right? Then once I've got everyone through that, there could be something in there that is super, super close to the bone. There could be someone that looks like my kid. Yeah. There could be someone there that looks like my wife. There could be someone there that I actually wasn't able to save and did CPR on. That's a dead ringer. They're like, hang on, this cut really close to the bone. I'm sweet, but now I've got this. I can't talk to these people about it. I can't, because I've just led them out of that crisis. I need someone else that I can go to and go, hey, listen, I need a flipping leadership debrief here. Yep. But because the leaders in the space aren't even at that level, they're not even at the level that they can sort themselves out in the mirror. They're not at the level where they can help another human being, let alone then come and ask for professional support. So, and I appreciate you being honest about that, about the finances, because anyone that's listening to this podcast right now on the 6th of December, 2023, gets to hear from Lisa Westgate before she cracks it financially. And this is really important to note, is because we did all of this stuff broke. We've been in it because we've lived it. We save lives. We always have. We always will. And that's what we do before we got the money. Yeah. For those of us that do this for the right reasons, the money always comes last. I've just been a little bit sneakier about it in selling the illusion and teaching the truth. I've learned different languages. The number one skill that I've learned is how to communicate value. I can walk into any environment and figure out what they need, what value they put on it, and communicate that value. Now, what I do when I walk in the room never changes. What Lisa Westgate does when she walks in the room never changes. It's just getting in that bloody room. That was the first challenge. Then the next challenge comes where people inside the room are like, hey, we've got an issue inside this room. We can't let anyone else know outside the room. Who do we call? And then they start calling us. You need Dion Jensen, you need Lisa Westgate. And then you come in, and that's the ad hoc stuff, right? 15 grand here, 20 grand here, nothing for 3 months, 80 grand this month, bam, 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 and it's all over the show, right? And you can't financially forecast. And then until you get a government contract or you get into that sort of level, which is where we went, that's where we're sitting at the moment, where it's big money stuff now because we're an organization. It's no longer Dion Jensen that they're dealing with. They're now dealing with the Line Academy, a global organization with 7,000 people. Now, the beautiful thing with me is as soon as I walk into any sort of contract that has the, hey, how are we supporting our frontline staff? I'm at the point where I'm offering free workshops so that they can't say no because of the money. Now they're stuck. They're like, well, how do we say no to this guy now? I'm like, I'm literally 100 meters away from my local police station. I had the police up here yesterday and I said, I'll run all your trauma stuff for free. Now they're like, oh, how do we say no? We can't say qualifications. He's clinically endorsed. We can't say budget. He's doing it for free. We can't say time and location. He's 100 meters down the road. We were just up there for lunch yesterday. Like, how do we now say no to this guy? It can only be systemic, right? And so I sent a live email 2 weeks ago to New Zealand Parliament, Chief of Defence Force, and every military commander in this country that there will be another suicide on base unless you listen to me, because of what I just dealt with. A week later, a guy went out to camp and hung himself. So now that email that I sent, all the stuff that I bloody told you so, is now swimming around in this space. When you become an organization, you get to that point, then you've got to use that income to put all your stuff online and have that happening automatically. And you know me, I'm big on the online stuff because you can never rely on clients, you can never rely on funding, and you can never rely on online stuff singularly, however you say that word. And that's what we were doing with our coaching. And you've got to put them all together at the same time. But what I love about this is any of those contracts that come for the Lion Academy globally that requires that expertise, you're the first one I'm stealing. It'll just be a contract. Be, sister, I need you for 12 months. I need you to make yourself available for one workshop a month online. And I need you available on 3 days a week between these hours. There's 250 grand. Just do what you do. And then that's how we all evolve together.
Yeah.
We've hit a point now in the influencer space. And when I say I'm a global influencer, I'm not being a dick. What I'm saying is globally, we've created the world's first good news book about PTSD. It didn't exist until we wrote it. Now we've got the program. Now we've got this. We're influencing things on a global level. So you've got to be able to qualify that statement. I'm not Tony Robbins. I don't want to be Tony Robbins. I'm not Brendan Burchard. I don't want to be those guys. But those guys showed us that there is a way to be profitable just by sharing your knowledge. Their machine was just sharing their experience and sharing their knowledge, and they made an absolute fortune because the machine was set up to facilitate their gift in such a way that provided value en masse. And the en masse was the answer for this. So the only way to get consistent, profitable income as a helper, as a healer, there's only really 3 ways. And you've walked 2 of them. That the first one is doing it the one-on-one stuff and going out there as a onesie like we all did. And then the group coaching. And the second one is where you start getting some wins and some VIP stuff, but it's inconsistent. The third way is when you own the organization. There is strength in numbers. That is the only way we're going to survive what comes next. We must be linked up as organizations. And so that's why Dion Jensen doesn't really do a lot. Like as a onesie, I'm just about to go out speaking next year to raise the awareness of what the academy does.
Yeah.
Then the year after that, Dion Jensen will fade to the back. It'll be about the academy. And through the academy will be, Taro Moore Baker and Holly Wikilifi and Corinne Tasker and Jim Siamanu and Jasli Fisatuli and everyone that's in the academy. They will rise up as the leaders. But you must become an organization or work with organizations. So many of us end up as trainers. Like I know there's an awesome guy out there. His name's Corey, who you know as well. And I've been talking to him and I've been watching him. He's been through his journey. Now he's a mental health first aid trainer because he believes in it for someone else's company. And he's just getting bounced around all of these sites delivering mental health first aid stuff. He'll never get out of that and build his own stuff unless he starts building that on the side. And so what I'm seeing with you, with the evolution of you, Lisa, is you're always going to be a ninja of what you do. Like anyone listening to this podcast, I know how good I am. I'm global. And I cannot do what Lisa Westgate does. And that, I know this because I've watched other people that are not as good as me smashing it, making millions of dollars. And I'm sitting there thinking, that guy is a dick. And he's just regurgitating everyone else's stuff. And he's making millions of dollars and he's on this and he's on that. And he's not 50% as good as I am in what I can do based on my professional career, professional soldier, professional police officer, professional like we're professionals. We are so much more effective than these people. And there's that inherent frustration that they're getting more financial value for crap. And so we have to understand how influence works and how that machine works to put the real stuff in there.
Yeah.
And that is the only way forward. But I love this, and I don't like seeing you in this state because you'll come to that realization yourself, obviously. But I love this moment in time where this is the most peaceful I've seen you. This is probably the most articulate I've heard you. Like you still just drop these bloody wordsmithing bombs in there. Like you just drop this, hey, listen, the person already can see this movie in their head because they've lived it. And I'm just like, God, I'm just going to say that now because that's so much easier. That's your gift. Like I'm good at it. Like I'm really good at metaphors and everything else, but you have the ability to weave a metaphor into live context in the moment. And you're so much better at it than I am. Like as far as skill and effectiveness goes, there are things that you do. I can't even do them, sister. So I've always been excited for when it gets to that point where an organization listening to this goes, you know what? We actually need to pull in a corporate consultant. I've always seen you as a corporate consultant owning your own organization. Spiral Evolution Academy is the contracted organization to come into Victoria Police And the Spiral Evolution Academy will run recruit training in regards to trauma on this 5-year contract for this many police staff, and you're in charge of all of that, and you are hiring your trainers that you've trained, and you're bringing in your people. That's where I see you. I see you initially being that organization that is contracted to other organizations. There's a lady called Katrina Walton, and she is amazingly successful in the corporate wellness space. And I spoke to her at an event, and she just owns the wellness space for organizations. And she's brilliant because she's honest, and she goes, my work stops at trauma. I can do all your corporate wellness stuff. I can do all the stuff that you have to do, whether it's tick box tokenism. She will not do anything on less than a 5-year contract, and she is expensive. She charges a premium because she's an organization. But she's just like you, and she's just like me. And so when your organization is at that level, and this is why I've been watching your evolution, because I've seen you playing with these different identities, but you're playing with individual identities, sister. You need an organizational identity that will lift your financial value. The financial value of Lisa Westgate as an individual coach, you're fighting with every other individual coach out there. So your financial value as an individual coach, man, it's a battle. As soon as you change your identity from Lisa Westgate to the Spiral Evolution Academy that organizationally does this stuff, your financial value will go through the roof. That is horrible for me to say, because you and I do not give a shit about that. We'll just save the next life of the person that comes across our door. But from a global perspective, that's the evolution you need to take.
Yeah. Look, and there's definitely part of my growth is working through any internal pushback around learning to play the game, right? So who I was a few years ago was so resistant to some of the stuff that you just said, right?
Yep.
Like, but I don't want to do it that way, and I don't, and that's my work to do, right?
Yep.
In releasing any stories that I've got about that being inauthentic, or like, okay, cool. So yeah, I think the next thing is to just clear out the last of any of those stories and beliefs, which is what I help other people with, right? That are getting in the way of that, right? Because if it's just my story that I'm holding on to about that not being, authentic.
Yep. I'm going to fast forward this whole conversation. Like, you were very vulnerable on this podcast, and I'm just gonna. I even catch myself because I want to say this, then I remember I'm talking to you, and that gives me the freedom to say it, right? Man, I just want to slap you across the face, eh? Like, metaphorically, anyone watching this, I don't condone violence against women, but this is my sister. I just want to do a big metaphorical slap her across the face and go, I'm going to ask you these questions. Lisa, can you save the life of someone that's suicidal if they work with you and do what they say?
Yep.
Can you walk into any organization on the planet now, figure out what the fuck is going wrong and fix it?
Yep.
Well, stop fucking around, start your organization and get in there. You're already that person. And I don't want to sit around and wait for you to come to the realization when the time is right. Just do it.
Do it.
Create your organization, rebrand yourself, and go, right. So you knew me as this. I started this podcast, another podcast. My brother just slapped me around the ears and said, stop pissing around with this shit. Form your organization and go for organizational contracts and start banging on all of these doors. And there is no doubt in what you do. You are not playing the game and masquerading and playing dress up to be an organization. You already are. And I've been through those doubts as well. And I said, I'm just going to create the Line Academy. We're going to be the most powerful psychosocial organization in the South Pacific. Like, we're just going to attack everything that everyone's scared of. We're going to be good at it. We're not going to be anyone else's permission. I'll be kinder in my communication when I'm going out there, but I can't church this interview up. Anyone that's listening to me and hears any of my other stuff, I don't swear.
I was going to say that. It's serious because I bring out sweary.
I refuse professionally to drop the F-bomb. You will never hear me say the C word unless someone is going to die.
Yeah.
But I don't drop F-bombs or swear at all when I'm articulating as the founder of the Line Academy. And I would be doing my sister a disservice if I said, Lisa, what I'm seeing here in the global influencing space is that unless you form an organization and you meet the qualifying criteria for funding, you're not going to make it. My suggestion, Lisa, is that you form an organization and go after organizational contracts. What a lie that frequency would be, talking to you, looking you in the face.
Yeah.
You're already at that level, sister, and I'm telling you what, you're better than probably 90% of those organizations that are out there selling shit. So if you don't think, if you're not playing the game, we have to become the antithesis of shit, because people are dying because they're learning stuff that does not work. So I took on a competitive mentality. I'm going to go into the space and I'm going to compete. I'm going to walk into the space as a global organization. I'm going to compete. And you're going to pay me $50,000 for me to speak on a keynote, and I'm going to bring a $10 million pilot, because that's what I'm worth. And if you don't think I'm worth that, then we'll compete over it. And I'll keep competing until someone says, we can't let this guy in there because he's got, he's this guy. And then as soon as their daughter kills themselves, or one of their employee kills themselves, and everyone sits there and goes, oh, we're going to do this, they're just going to, you know what? We can't keep doing this. We can't keep letting our people kill themselves because we're what's stopping the help coming in. It's going to get to that point, sister. It's happening now. Anyone listening to this podcast, if you are part of an organization, you need to go to your bosses straight after you've heard this, book an open door meeting, because everyone's got an open door policy. Sit down and say, I listened to this podcast and I heard Lisa Westgate and Dion Jensen saying they've got solutions to all this shit that you've just told me I've got to meet a KPI on, and I'm sick of sitting in these meetings hearing all this tokenistic bullshit about calling 1737 Lifeline and suicide outreach, when there are two global superstars out there that do this all over the world that could come in here and fix this now, and she's in Melbourne.
Yep.
That's what needs to happen, sister. But I really got to cut away.
Me too.
I could talk to you all day, and I love you dearly.
I know. Thank you so much for making the time for the metaphorical slap across the face. I'm excited for what's to come. And the continued evolution, right? I can't keep preaching evolution for individuals. I can't keep preaching organizational evolution and not continue evolving myself, right? That would be the essence of hypocritical, like you said. So, I see today's conversation has been really vulnerable because you and I are very close. But I see it as another opportunity for that continued growth. So I thank you for your time. Dion's links for everywhere will be in the show notes. If you do want to access any of his the Lion Academy stuff and the good news about PTSD book and course, then please contact me, even if you want to email me anonymously or whatever it is, and I will connect you through to Dion if you're in crisis, and we'll get you access to some really amazing resources as soon as possible.
You are very welcome. And anyone listening to this podcast, you are the most important person on this podcast. Lisa and I love each other dearly. And while I'm talking about loving people, give Big Sexy a big cuddle for me. Give Mark a big cuddle for me, and tell him, and make sure that beard is still righteous. And then anyone that's listened to this podcast, well done if you've survived this conversation to this point. And I'll leave you with two of my favorite quotes. If you can make peace with the mirror, you will understand that if there is no enemy within, then the enemy without can do us no harm. And if you're struggling right now, it's always darkest before the sunrise, and the sun will come up tomorrow.
Absolutely. Amazing. Love you, brother.
Love you too, sister. Take care, eh?
Sure.
Sure. Love you, daughter.
Talk soon. Thanks, mate.